me say that to do a fair assessment, it's important to premise the discussions on the principles that governs or regulates code of generally accepted principles. We're looking, and then here again, for the purpose of this discussion, I am looking at the principles as set out by Transparency International, and I guess it's also a fair principle because Transparency International is fairly known as an authority on the subject. So we look at the issues of clarity and specificity. This is important because when we are discussing the issues about gift, I would come back to it. Then we are also looking at issues of transparency and accountability. And then we look at the issues of training and capacity building relative to code of conduct. Now, the issue of clarity and specificity is important in the context of looking at the gift giving. And I say that if you take the provision or the section on gifting and you test it by the principles of clarity and specificity, you would see that the code has inherent weaknesses. On the introduction to that section talks about you not accepting the gift at all, whether it is a cash or in kind, you should not. But then it goes forward and say that if you may, who won't? Because you see, if you read that section, the whole section, it talks about the fact that in public events it is not acceptable, it's not a good practice, you will offend the system, and therefore you have to collect it and declare. You would realize that the code is very heavy on the accountability and transparency component, but very weak on the issue of specificity and clarity, because it leans more on double standardness. You shouldn't, but if you may. But we know that we all will. Now the section goes forward to talk about the fact that if it exceeds 20,000, now materiality comes in. If you talk about 20,000, if you read the best practices that your earlier discussant also they talked about, you realize that the values are very low. Are very low, and it's estimated that they are so low that it will hardly influence a public official. Right. Now we are talking about our situation where it is more than $1,000. We are talking about even at the current exchange rate, we are talking about something close to about $1,000, $3,000, $4,500. This figure is set thinking that, well, ministers, but we are talking about the ministers usage in a general sense. Have you thought about the DCE in some remote community? What 20,000 means to that individual? So you may think that 20,000 in no way would compromise the appointees here in Accra or the big cities. But 20,000 is a whole lot of money to a DCE in some remote community, and that 20,000 can't compromise somebody. So these are the inherent weaknesses, particularly relative to the gift